What's up, guys? My name's Brandon, and welcome back to Apple Weekly. In this episode, we're going to be discussing even more new changes in iOS 18.5. We have some fresh new iOS 19 details. The next generation CarPlay is finally here and why it's so amazing. Why iPhone prices might be increasing this year. A crazy AirTag story, and more. And as always, make sure you check out the Apple Den Discord server and the Apple Den newsletter. Both of those are linked down in the description below. Okay, so this week we saw the final official release of iOS 18.5. It did have a slightly different build number than what we saw with the RC build. So if you were running the betas for iOS 18.5, you would have received an update this week because we did have a different build number than what we saw with the RC. Now, there wasn't anything really different with that new build. However, this week we did see some new details about the security patches that were included with iOS 18.5. And taking a look at those right here, there are over 30 security vulnerabilities patched with iOS 18.5. And interestingly, there's an exclusive for the iPhone 16e for a vulnerability that impacted the device's baseband. And you can see that the impact is pretty interesting. So it says an attacker in a privileged network position may be able to intercept network traffic. So that's a crazy one that was luckily fixed. And there are several others as well, including vulnerabilities related to Bluetooth, FaceTime, iCloud document sharing, the kernel, and more. And at least the good news is that none of these vulnerabilities were being actively exploited. There were no reports of any of them being actively exploited out in the wild. Now, there was also something interesting in iOS 18.5 that was inside of the code, and this is a reference to the AirPods Pro 3, or at least maybe a hint, I should say, of the AirPods Pro 3, because Apple changed a string from saying requires AirPods Pro 2. They changed it to say AirPods Pro 2 or later. And there was a separate string for AirPods 4, so it's not referring to the AirPods 4. So Apple changed this to basically indicate that AirPods Pro 3 are coming soon. So of course, this isn't like a grand leak. We don't know a release date or anything, but we do know that at least Apple is preparing on the back end for the AirPods Pro 3. So I would not be surprised at all to see those within the next few months or at the end of this year at the latest. Also this week, we saw Apple partner with UMG, Universal Music Group, to bring us sound therapy on Apple Music. And what this is it's essentially just 3 new playlists. So we have one for Focus right here, which I've used multiple times this week, and it is amazing. It's probably the best focus-based playlist that I've heard yet. So, I thought this was going to be kind of gimmicky, but it's really not. So Sound Therapy Focus is amazing. I would highly recommend that. We also have Sound Therapy Relax, and then we also have one for Sleep. So these are 3 playlists, and you can see right here, we have descriptions of each one of them as well. So definitely something to check out if you are interested in this type of thing. Apple also made a change to Apple Maps this week. So if you search for something like restaurant, for example, and you scroll over, you can see that we have something new for Michelin distinctions. So from here, you can search for Michelin star restaurants, a 1-star, 2-star, or any of these right here, and you can apply that, and then it will show those that match that description. So this is new, and basically what they're trying to do is feature insights from expert sources, like of course the Michelin Guide, and there are some others there as well. Now, if you guys remember, for the past couple of weeks, we've been talking about how Fortnite is going to be back in the US App Store, but if you search for Fortnite right now, you will see that there's no Fortnite in the App Store. So what is going on? Well, Fortnite actually took to X to tell us what's going on. Here's what they said. Apple has blocked our Fortnite submission, so we cannot release to the US App Store or to the Epic Game Store for iOS in the EU. Now, sadly, Fortnite on iOS will be offline worldwide until Apple unblocks it. And then Apple responded to this on Friday by saying this: we asked that Epic Sweden resubmit the app updates without including the US storefront of the App Store so as not to impact Fortnite in other geographies. We did not take any action to remove the live version of Fortnite from alternative distribution marketplaces in the EC. So if you thought it was going to go back to normal and everybody would just be on their way, going their separate ways, you were greatly mistaken. I think Apple is going to continue to fight this, and Epic is going to continue to fight this for years to come. I honestly, at this point, don't know what it's going to take for things to just be back to how they were before. Now, this week, we also saw something we've been waiting years to see. It is finally here, and that is CarPlay Ultra. Yes, we didn't know that's what it'd be called, but the next generation of CarPlay has officially launched, and Apple is calling it CarPlay Ultra. So this launched with Aston Martin, so they have the exclusive deal with Apple for now, but it will roll out to other automakers over time. Apple did also announce a few newly committed brands, including Hyundai, Kia, and Genesis, and those three are likely just on top of the other automakers we've heard years ago that were already on board for this change, this new CarPlay. So anyways, you can see here, Apple says CarPlay Ultra provides content for all the driver's screens, including the instrument cluster with dynamic and beautiful options for the speedometer, tachometer, fuel gauge, temperature gauge, and more. So you can control the AC, the radio, and even advanced vehicle-specific features and controls like audio system configurations or performance settings right from CarPlay. So this seems awesome, but I know one big concern that a lot of people have had is like, why would I want my infotainment? Why would I want my screen to just look like everybody else's out there? If I'm driving, a $300,000 Aston Martin, why would I want my system to look the same as a $20,000 Honda? But Apple is saying that's not going to be the case because they say the design of CarPlay Ultra will be unique to each automaker. Apple says that custom themes are crafted in close collaboration between Apple and the automaker's design team, resulting in experiences that feel tailor-made for each vehicle. Drivers can also personalize the colors and wallpapers of themes to match their individual tastes. So thankfully, you're not going to have the same design in your Aston Martin as you would in a Honda Civic. And that's no discrimination against either one of those. I've just been reading a lot of comments about what people are saying about this, and a lot of people in Aston Martins don't want the same setup as you get in a Civic, for example. Doesn't make a big difference to me, but hey, that's what people like. Okay, so now we have to talk about iOS 19. So this week we did see the first official iOS 19 accessibility features get announced. I did make a full video on that, so I'm not going to cover any of those features here, but if you do want to see some of the officially announced features from Apple for iOS 19, macOS 16, and all the other operating systems, check out that video. It's up in the cards and down in the description below. It's an interesting video. But this week we saw some really interesting tidbits and updates coming to iOS 19 that are not yet official by Apple. And one of those is AI battery management. So iOS 19 might actually have the AI battery management feature that we've been hearing about for quite some time now. And this comes from Mark Gurman. So he says that Apple is planning an AI-powered battery management mode for iOS 19. The enhancement will analyze how a person uses their device and makes adjustments to conserve energy. To create the technology, which is a part of the Apple Intelligence platform, Apple is using battery data it has collected from users' devices to understand trends and make predictions for when it should lower the power draw of certain applications or features. There also will be a lock screen indicator showing how long it will take to charge up the device. So this just seems like the battery intelligence feature that we've been hearing about in the code, I think in iOS 17 or iOS 18, early in iOS 18. It was just a framework then, but now we're hearing this full feature is coming with iOS 19, which I think is awesome. I think that's long overdue. And of course, I think this is mostly going to be introduced because of the iPhone 17 Air, because Apple and pretty much everybody else is worried about the battery life for that device since it's so razor thin. But this is expected to come to other devices as well. We're even hearing that it might be on all devices, whether you have Apple Intelligence or not. So Apple is going to market this as an Apple Intelligence feature, but it might actually be on devices that don't have Apple Intelligence, if that makes sense. So I'm going to be curious to see how Apple markets that and how they kind of describe that, because that's kind of confusing just saying it out loud. But that's not the only thing Mark Gurman hinted at, because he also told us that in iOS 19, we're going to have a feature to sync captive Wi-Fi data between devices. So he says the new operating systems will be able to sync details across devices for wireless networks that users need to log into via the web browser, a common task when entering gyms, hotels, or office buildings. So basically, if you're in like a hotel, for example, and you know how you have to go on that web page and you have to put in like your room number and your name or a password or whatever, once you do that on one device, you still have to do it on every other device that you connect. So with this feature, it seems like that captive data will sync together. So if you have a MacBook and a phone, you only need to log in on the MacBook and it will sync that information to your phone, so you won't have to go back to that captive Wi-Fi page and put in that information again. So small feature, but that will be a handy one that will absolutely save time when you're in public places like a hotel or a gym. But perhaps most importantly in this report, Mark Gurman says this about iOS 19. Apple is allegedly pushing engineers to ensure that iOS 19 is a more functional and less glitchy updates. So yes, more functional and less glitchy. That's like music to the ears of anybody who beta tests and really just anybody who pays a lot of attention to iOS in general, because we've had so many bugs, we've had so many issues lately with iOS 17 and iOS 18. So the fact that we're hearing now that engineers are trying to make sure that we don't have as many bugs is a great thing. Even if we don't have as many features, I will gladly take a bug fix update, like a big overhaul to make sure we don't have as many bugs over a bunch of new features. Now, granted, we do hear this all the time, so we'll have to wait and see if this actually comes to fruition, but my hopes are pretty high for a more stable iOS 19. Now, if you are a movie fan, and especially if you're an F1 fan, we just got a new trailer for Apple's upcoming movie F1. So this stars Brad Pitt. So if you want to see this trailer, I will leave a link down in the description below. It was a pretty good one. Anyways, going back to iOS 18.5 for a moment here. So again, the final public release came out this week, and it did have a different build number, but the performance and the battery life were exactly the same for me. I was really paying attention to the nitty gritty to see if I could tell any type of difference in performance or battery life, but I really could not. So I've had no complaints, and surprisingly, if you look at the comments for the iOS 18.5 What's New video, hardly anybody says anything about bad battery or performance. If anything, people are saying that the performance and battery life have gotten better with 18.5. So that's very rare in the comment section to read that. I know I say that most of the time because that is usually the case for most people, but in the comment section to see that is a good sign. So performance and battery life seem to be solid here on 18.5 on all devices. But if you have a different experience, please let me know in the comments down below so I can address that and see if others are having issues with that. But as far as what to expect next from Apple, next up is going to be iOS 18.6 Beta 1. Now we should see that first beta come out next week, the week of May 19th. But of course, I think a lot of people are just not even going to care about that at this point. We are less than a month away from iOS 19 being debuted at WWDC on Monday, June 9th. That is so close. I cannot believe it. But if you are still interested in the betas, 18.6 Beta 1 should start next week, and we'll probably get that final release near the end of June, early July. And we're not expecting much from that update. It's probably just going to bring AI to other countries and other small bug fix updates and minor changes. Okay, so now let's go back to some Apple news, and this is kind of some bad news because we're now hearing from the Wall Street Journal that Apple might be hiking prices for the iPhone 17 series, and it might not be because of tariffs. So in the Wall Street Journal's report, they're saying that Apple is planning iPhone price hikes, but they will pair them with new features and design changes to avoid linking the increase to US-China tariffs. Because as you know, there is still a 20% tariff on US imports from China, and that does include smartphones. So apparently Apple is worried about the backlash of this price increase, so they want to avoid public perception that tariffs are behind the price jump. And interestingly, iPhone production is shifting to India pretty rapidly, with Tim Cook saying that most iPhones shipped to the US in Q2 will be made in India. But despite that shift, the Pro and Pro Max models will continue to be made in China due to India's current manufacturing limitations. And keep in mind that this report is saying that Apple is considering raising prices for the iPhone 17 series. They're not saying for sure that Apple's going to increase prices, but me personally, I think this is the year it's more likely for Apple to raise prices compared to any previous year. Like every year we hear about Apple potentially raising prices, but I've never thought it made sense for them to do it until now. It's not that I want them to, trust me. I want Apple to keep the prices the exact same, if not lower them. But I think with everything going on with the tariffs and also with the new product lineup, I think this makes more sense for them to increase prices, unfortunately. And the reason I say that is because I don't think it's a coincidence that we just got the cheap iPhone 16e, like cheaper, I should say, iPhone 16e. The lowest end iPhone now is the 16e, and we're also getting a new 17 Air this year. So we're getting a new like premium model. That's just psychology. That's gonna allow for a new pricing structure for the iPhone lineup. So what I'm trying to say is I would not be surprised to see a price increase this year, maybe by $100, and we might actually get extra storage for that. So we might see the base storage jump up a bit as well to maybe 256 as the minimum for the Pro, and maybe even the Air as well. It's hard to say at this point, and people have been asking me as well if I think the Air is gonna be as expensive as the Pro Max. I do not think so. I think think the Pro Max is still going to be the most expensive iPhone, but I do think that the iPhone 17 Air is going to be about the same price as the regular 17 Pro. So it might be the same price, either $999 or $1099, or it might be like right in the middle there, maybe like a $50 difference from the Pro. But I do think it's going to be more than, of course, the base 17 and less than the 17 Pro Max. But we'll have to wait and see. What do you guys think? Do you think Apple's going to raise prices this year for the iPhone 17 series? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I'm conflicted, but I guess we'll have to wait and see on that. Now, speaking of the iPhone 17 Air, we're also hearing that a new advanced silicone battery tech might debut with the iPhone 17 Air. So this comes from Japanese supplier TDK, and they're preparing to ship its new generation of silicon anode batteries by the end of June, which may give Apple enough time to add them to the Air. So according to DigiTimes, the CEO of TDK said in a recent interview that they're accelerating the production timeline, moving shipments forward from September to the end of June. He suggested that that may give smartphone makers enough time to use the cells in thinner models launching this year. And TDK's batteries use silicon for anodes instead of the traditional graphite, allowing them to pack 15% more energy into the same space compared to conventional rechargeable battery packs. So that, of course, will be key for the iPhone 17 Air to get good battery life, which is, at this point, everybody's main concern with that thin iPhone 17 Air. Now, speaking of new iPhone models, we have to talk about the iPhone Fold, because so many people have been talking about this for so long, and it looks like for sure that Apple is going to be releasing a foldable iPhone within the next couple of years. And we're now hearing a new report from Mark Gurman that says the first foldable iPhone should be on the market by 2027. So he said this: Apple's first foldable iPhone, which some at the company consider to be one of two major decade anniversary initiatives, should be on the market by 2027. This device will be unique in that the typical foldable display crease is expected to be nearly invisible. And Gurman clarified what he meant by on the market by 2027 on an X post. He said it'll launch at the end of 26 and sell mostly in 27. So very confusing verbiage there. He says mostly in 2027, so maybe it will go on sale at the end of 2026, but most sales will be in 2027. He doesn't really make much sense with the way he's wording this here, but in any case, we are most likely going to see at least a launch, at least an announcement of the iPhone Fold at the end of 2026, which I'm super excited for, especially if it's like what he says, where you can barely see the crease in the middle, because that's been my number one complaint when I use a foldable device. I just cannot stop staring at that crease in the middle. It drives my OCD crazy. So if Apple does this right, that will be a pretty big seller with a pretty big price point as well. You better believe that. And then we also got a new update on the upcoming AirPods and the Apple Watch, because they're going to get those tiny AI cameras in 2027 as well. So also in this report, Gurman was talking about the upcoming glasses that are going to be similar to the Meta glasses. So he said the glasses will feature Apple Intelligence and use cameras to gather context about the surrounding environment, like the visual intelligence feature on the latest iPhones. Also in the 2027 timeframe, Apple is planning new AirPods and watches that include cameras, giving them similar functionality. So notice how he says the 2027 timeframe, not specifically 2027. So these might be coming at a later date, but just imagine having a camera on your Apple Watch and also in your AirPods for things like visual intelligence. That would be pretty cool. I'm struggling to see how that would actually work right now, like when I would use that in a real world situation, but I guess we'll have to wait and see on that, because I'm sure it's something that we're not even thinking of right now. And by the way, I do not think he's referencing the AirPods Pro 3. I think we are going to see the AirPods Pro 3 before 2027, long before that. I think it's going to be the AirPods Pro 4 with those cameras in them. And then finally, just as tradition, we have another crazy AirTag story, and this time it's going to be a bit different. I couldn't find any crazy stories this week, but I did find something that's interesting, and I want to hear your guys' input on this. And it is related to an AirTag, so just bear with me. So this was posted on Reddit, the Am I the A-hole subreddit right here. So basically this woman said this: I'm taking my 8-year-old son Jack on an overseas vacation later this year. My ex-spouse Richard has been saying negative things about the trip and is now insistent that we place an AirTag in Jack's shoe so he can track him from his phone. It's created a lot of back and forth with him being very upset. I've traveled with Jack many times without incident, but the badgering from my ex is making me question myself. Am I the a-hole? So just off the rip, what do you think? Do you think this woman's in the right to not allow her ex-spouse to track the kid with an AirTag in his shoe? I think that's crazy. Personally, I would not allow that either. But, I guess different people have different parenting, solutions and different ways to parent. That just seems a bit too far to put that in his shoe when he's hours away and she is with him at all times. So she basically added an edit to this as well and said that the ex-spouse refuses to let her register the AirTag to her phone, and he will be at least 10 hours of travel time away, so he will not realistically be available to help if there were an emergency. He's been very aggressive in the past, and he says that their parenting plan allows her to travel with her son without his approval beyond dates, so he cannot stop the trip or force her to use an AirTag. Unfortunately, when Richard is upset, it impacts Jack, so that makes me question myself. So what do you think about this situation? Do you think that he should be allowed to force her to put an AirTag in her son's shoe while they're traveling and he has access to the location on his phone? Or do you think that she is in the right to basically just say, no, that's not going to happen. I'm with them. You're forever away. We don't need the AirTag in his shoe. What are your thoughts on this? And what are your thoughts overall in general of using an AirTag to track a kid? Like, I get it if they're going to school and you have it in their backpack or whatever, but what do you think specifically about putting it like in their shoe? I'm curious to know what your thoughts are on that situation. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. As always, if you did, give it a thumbs up. Also, be sure to subscribe if you have not done so already. I post these Apple Weekly episodes every single Saturday. But anyways, guys, thanks for watching, and I'll see you soon.